Welcome, everyone, to Frontline Dispatches on Organizing Upgrade, a show dedicated to spotlighting left organizing and activism happening around the country and beyond for racial and economic justice, and much more. Stay tuned for future episodes of Frontline Dispatches every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern and at 6 p.m. Central and 4 p.m. Pacific time. My name is Jennifer Disla, and I'll be today's host. Okay, let's get into it. My guest today is Brandon Brown, coming to you from the New Georgia Project in Georgia. Brandon is an organizer, trainer, and strategist. Welcome, Brandon.
Hey, thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. I'm super excited for our conversation today. So let's dive right into it. So I was curious to know, how would you describe New Georgia's project's path to victory in 2022?
Yeah, so our path to victory is simple. We want to make sure that every voter votes in every election. And so we're constantly talking to voters and making sure that they are even aware that there's elections going on, right? Because most voters pay attention to the bigger elections. You talk about presidentials or your governors, but we want to make sure that we're consistently reaching out and communicating with them about midterm elections, municipal elections, all the things that do matter, especially on a local level.
That's great. And I know we were talking a little bit before we started the show about the municipal elections. Can you talk a little bit about sort of what's coming up for you now on this current cycle?
Yeah. So there's over 1,600 municipal elections in Georgia, right? And so we specifically at New Georgia Project are going to focus on about 160 of them. And so we're looking at races pretty much up and down from mayor, city council presidents, as well as school board races. And we want to make sure that we continue to inform people about what's going on in these races, who's running, where they can vote, any other things that may come up, as well as polling closures and those sort of things.
What have been some activities that you guys have been participating in as you think about this municipal race thinking through about 2022?
Yeah. So all of the things, we've been doing canvassing, phone banking, as well as volunteer programs. We've also launched a Rise to the Polls program. So making sure that people that want to go vote actually have the opportunity to go vote regardless of their situation, if they need transportation, just really doing all of the things in order to make sure that people get to the polls to vote in these upcoming local elections. So we're continuing to be testing out a couple of different things, especially ahead of 2022.
I know you mentioned about absentee ballots and how that's been playing a role in this election and preparing for 2022. Mm-hmm. What have been some challenges and some barriers around that?
Yeah, I think the challenges that we're seeing this year specifically with SB 202 is the shortened window of absentee voting. And so we really have a period where people are requesting their absentee ballots. Sometimes the mail takes a lot longer. And with that window being shortened, it's harder for people to complete that absentee ballot and ensure that it gets mailed back on time. And so what we're expecting to happen is a lot of voters showing up at voting precincts and understanding their vote hasn't been counted yet because of that lag in time between the absentee ballot hitting the mailbox and then having voters to have to go in and vote provisional, which then causes another problem of voters having to come back and actually certify their votes. So these are all just effects of SB 202 that comes just with unintended consequences, but we know a lot of this was by design.
Yeah, so talking about design, can you tell us a little bit on how the voter suppression work has impacted the landscape and what the fight looked like that you guys were involved with recently?
Yeah, so it's it's an uphill battle, right? We still have a lot of these challenges coming out of SB 202. We talked about the absentee ballot piece. The most famous piece, of course, is some of the water stuff and line warming stuff that comes out of it. And so we want to make sure that voters, one, have access to all the tools that they need in order to actually vote in upcoming elections and make it comfortable for them. So as I'm sure a lot of people have seen across the nation where we had lines up to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours and voters just waiting in line, especially right now, it can still be hot outside. So we want to make sure that common decency things like having water or making sure that people are able to actually have enough time to early vote is going to be super important when we're talking about new legislation that should be brought up in 2022. And so that kind of connects to why it's so important to vote in these upcoming elections, especially in things like state house, state ledge, because these are the people who are going to be deciding what these laws look like in 22.
Yeah. So, the Biden administration had disappointed different sectors, and this has a tendency to make people less excited to vote. Are
Mhm.
there any tension points as you're trying to get people out to vote?
I would say for us, like the biggest thing that we're hearing on doors when it comes to people about voting is just about like one like misinformation, right? Like who am I voting for? Is there an election for me? And so when it comes from like that federal level, like specifically right now, a lot of people are looking ahead for 22, but like with our municipal elections, like we're really just focused on giving people the right information about elections, where your elections actually taking place, and then when it comes to issues that voters care about, we want to continue to collect that information. And so, like, what we're hearing is really healthcare is going to be super important, as well as like education and public safety. And so, some of that flows into that Biden plan and some of those like Biden pinch points. But like again, like continue to give people the information that they want.
And how would you describe sort of like, think talking to people about their issues and thinking through about the things that they care about? Looking forward for 2022, how does the governor's race sort of play a role in like bringing those solutions to the forefront?
Yeah, I mean it's gonna be super important, right? Like I think we think about like our governor's race and like what the governor has the power to do. We look at our current governor that hasn't fully expanded Medicare, right? Medicaid, right? And so this is leaving federal dollars on the table for people that need healthcare. And so having a governor in place that would actually be able to fully expand that and accept that federal money, this will give people limited resources when it comes to how we look at healthcare for Georgians. And so we want to make sure that people have access to these these necessary programs, these necessary things that they need in the state, and we just aren't like pushing away free money that's sitting on the table because of personal opinion or because of our politics.
No, that's absolutely right. It's definitely important to make sure that we're capitalizing on all the federal dollars that are coming into our state. Interested to know, are there any other races that are priorities for 2022?
Yeah, like when we think about our priorities up and down the ballot, we of course want to look at the big U.S. Senate race that everyone's going to pay attention to, with Warnock running again. But we definitely want to make sure that we're paying attention to other seats like governor, as well as Secretary of State, Attorney General, and like I said, especially the state legislature, so state representatives, is going to be super important to a lot of the work that we have coming up, specifically in 22. And so we want to make sure that everyone knows about everything from top of the ticket with this big U.S. Senate race that everyone will be invested in, all the way down to our state house and state reps.
Are there any interesting races that are happening on the state legislator level?
We'll have to see. Like, I think we have a lot of movement in the state house. And so there's some current legislators that are vying for like bigger positions. So we'll see like what the contest looks like there in some of those open seats. But I think the biggest point that we're trying to focus in on and a lot of like other partner organizations is really flipping that state house, because it's going to be so important in terms of like crafting legislation. So when we continue to press on like SB 202 and all of like these other bad pieces that are coming out of the House and the Senate, we want to make sure that we have the people in place that are going to be able to advocate for these progressive policies and progressive pieces of legislation.
Absolutely. And you brought up again the voter suppression work, and just curious on, there was some corporate accountability work that New Georgia
Mhm.
Project was a part of. Can you walk us through on how that looked like and where you see that playing a role, if any, on moving forward?
Yeah, like we're still working through like a lot of the corporate accountability work, but I can tell you we did put a lot of pressure on corporations across Georgia, as well as like people who have big interest and who have donated to competing interests of progressive politics. And so we had a lot of conversations. We had some people who've like actually like changed their mind about what it means to support some of these elected officials, specifically Republicans. And so continue to press on like why it's important for these corporations like not to spend money on these races or not to invest time and energy supporting these candidates, whether it's going to be publicly or behind doors. So we'll keep pressing on them.
Absolutely. Switching gears a little bit, there were 4 Black sheriffs were voted into office in the 4 largest counties in Georgia in 2020. One of them also being the first woman ever elected. Is this directly related to the larger movement of Black Lives?
Yeah, I would say like you're seeing a change in how you have people who view elected office and like people running for office. And so I think it's a couple of different things. I think we're seeing higher participation in minority communities as well as people running for office that look like them. And so this is going to be super important, like not only in like sheriff's races as we like elect chairs and DAs and representatives, everything up and down the ballot, but I think as we continue to talk about what does it really mean and what do elected officials look like in the South, this is what elected officials like should continue to look like. So we should continue to get more people elected that look like their communities, as well as more people who are going to have a specific interest in their communities and not just serve from their desk or their office somewhere across the state.
Absolutely. That's super interesting. So tell us more about the coalition work to make this happen. What other community partners made this happen?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different community partners that actually we work with. So I mean, we've worked with Black Pac, we've worked with Black Voters Matter. Would be remiss if I didn't mention our partners at the C4 table in America Votes Georgia and everyone that sits at those tables. It's really a like all in together work where we're constantly working together, we're constantly communicating together to talk about what are the big issues in Georgia, how do we actually see Georgia shaping and changing for the better, and then how do we work together in coalition to make it happen? Because I'm sure, like, as you know, like as an organizer, it's not easy. Like there's no way that we can do all of this work alone. So it's going to literally take all of us working together in order to make sure that we take our small piece and that we continue to advocate and change Georgia in the way that we want to change it.
Super interesting. How do you bring folks from different sectors into the work?
Yeah, I think it's just really being open, right? Like a lot of, especially in party politics, we talk about like this big tent. And so I think when it comes to like organizing and just really like having a space, we like to meet people where they are. And so we're always going to be very open about like, what are your interests? What really matters to you? And like, where does the work intersect with that? So we don't just want to bring people into the space just to like do the work, to use them, and then just kind of like go on to the next thing. We like really want people to invest in this like day to day. And so like that's what's so important about like a lot of the work that we do, especially like as organizers, like you live this stuff. And so everywhere you go, you want to have conversations about why this is so important or why SB 202 is so bad or why this elected official is awful. And so like we really want to make sure that we give other people the space to do that. And that kind of folds into a lot of the work that we do at New Georgia Project and a lot of the different campaigns that we cover. So we have a myriad of like different campaigns, which I think it's about up to like 14 different campaigns now that we work on year round when it comes to organizing. So everything from healthcare to specific vibe and like specifically focusing on Black men and how they engage in the politics, all the way down to Oasis, which is like specifically focused on like seniors and how we communicate with them and getting involved in elections or getting involved in just issues that are important to them. So it's a year-round thing for us.
Absolutely. Yeah, year-round organizing is definitely, one of the things that we do at Detroit Action as well, and think through about like how do we keep people engaged and keep people engaged in their issues. Curious to hear more about, those different issues. Can you tell me a little bit about how those different issues also year-round helps to like bring people out? Have you seen them help bring people out to the polls, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean that's what organizing is, right? Like I think when we talk about the work that we do and the work that we're proud of, it's the fact that we're able to do this year round and like have real conversations about this stuff. Like we don't want to just come when elections come and like you see us at your door for 1 week talking about, hey, come out to vote, like we're here again. Like we really want to get invested in these communities. And so like that's why we like hire intentionally. We focus on the communities that we're in and we hire people in those communities so that they can talk to their neighbors and they can talk to their friends and they can talk to people that live next to them about these issues that are important. And so with like our different campaigns, that's really been the focus, is building those organizing campaigns up to where we're having real conversations year round about these issues that affect them and like what issues are important to specific communities in those different campaign groups.
If you're just joining us, I'm talking with Brandon Brown, organizer and strategist with New Georgia Project. Brandon, that's absolutely right. That year-round and investment is needed in our communities and is really what builds real relationships and partners trust and transparency in our communities. I would say that's really a difference from the Democratic Party's ways.
Yeah.
And so just very curious about how does New Georgia Project distinguish itself from the party?
I think just like that, like we do the work year round and we aren't necessarily focused on like what's the Democrat candidate or who is the party getting behind. We're more focused on like who's the progressive candidate and like who's really going to champion these issues that are going to be like super important for the communities that they're running in. And so that's specifically on our electoral side. On our organizing side, it's just really important that we have like our own messaging. We continue to push what it means to be progressive and continue to, even in like some spaces where the party can be a little bit more center, we want to continue to push like as far as we can in terms of like progressive policies that are really going to work for people that really need these policies, because that's what we're hearing from the community. And so like these are the messages that we're getting on the doors. We're just here to help continue to amplify those messages. And if that means to continue to push on what progressive means, we want to continue to push there.
Absolutely. For us in Detroit, we definitely have been thinking through about more invest, divest, and thinking through about how to, especially in this moment of the flooding happening in Detroit, and thinking through and like how do we get more resources for the infrastructure that's needed versus more resources for the police. And so you mentioned public safety as one of the issues, and just would love to hear and like the work and the reimagination that New Georgia Project is thinking through around that work.
Yeah, so I will start with specifically City Council of Atlanta, right? Like we saw this bad vote pass in the City Council. And so for those that aren't familiar, talking specifically about Cop City, from where the elected officials wanted to reimagine this public green space into a training facility for police and firefighters, as some other candidates like to throw in there. So with that, we're looking at like the entire makeup of City Council of Atlanta. And so really having the opportunity to endorse candidates that are progressive and true progressives. So we're super excited about like a lot of the work that we've done there with our committee, specifically around endorsements and looking at like what the options are for true progressive candidates. And so I can say this election cycle is special because we do have a lot of candidates that do fit that true progressive model. And we really have the opportunity to completely change that makeup of Atlanta City Council. So we don't have bad bills come across like Cop City again, to where we're taking 300 acres of green space and turning it into a training facility for police, where we can use that space for other things like gardens, like natural gardens, as well as like public spaces for people that live in those communities. And so this is like really a lot of the work when we talk about reimagining like public safety and how we address it. I think a lot of it starts at the like city council level, and ensuring that we have the right people at the table that aren't continuously giving police raises like you all have going on in Detroit, and that aren't reimagining like a lot of green space and a lot of the city, which we love so much, into places where we can continue to increase our police forces.
That's right. We have it going on in Detroit for now. There is an election. Just want to say that part right there, Brandon. Hopefully we'll change to new front.
We'll see.
We'll see. Absolutely. But talking a little bit about, the organizing groups, going back to like coalition building and thinking through about the last general election where we fired Trump. What were some senior and junior partners in relationship to those forces? So like how did, that coalition move? And do you think that coalition has the bandwidth, or what challenges they might face when thinking about the U.S. Senate race that's coming up in 2022?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say we have like senior and junior level partnerships, right? Like we are very much organizers, very much work together in an effort to make sure that all of the work gets done. And so when we're talking about coalition groups and partners that really invested in the work of 2020 and making sure that we get Trump out of office, it's going to be like a lot of those same partners that we mentioned working with earlier. So looking at our table for AV Georgia, so organizations like Black Male Voter Project, Black Men Vote, Black PAC, as well as AAAF, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Mi Gente, really just a large group of coalition members that really help to make up the universe of how we move this work in Georgia and how we continue to get people elected or get people out of office that shouldn't be in office with things like President Trump. So just really going to continue to pushing the work together and continue to change what it means to be an elected official, and making sure that we continue to push on that progressive message and progressive imaging in the state of Georgia. Because I'm sure, as you all know, it's going to be super important, especially as we have the upcoming U.S. Senate race in 22. We want to make sure that we continue to have that same pressure and that same coalition presence that we've had in 2020, as well as moving forward in other elections.
Absolutely. I know we talked a little bit about year-round organizing, but, every election, we have the experience of always hitting the pavement, right? So from city, county level, state level, federal level, they keep us busy.
Yeah, year-round, all the time.
All the time. So just curious to know, what are some lessons that, organizers can take from this ongoing electoral cycle? What would you like to share about, the relationships of like these ongoing elections and how they're all connected?
Yeah, I would say like one of the biggest lessons that we can take around from is really listening to the people and what they want in their communities. I think a lot of times, like, we have big organizations, we have national organizations that come in for these important races and like drop people down into communities and think like, oh, we just need volume, when it's really about like how we connect with people at their doors and how we connect with people in the community. So we really want to talk about what issues are important to them. And like, that's why it's so important for us with the year-round work that we do, because we get to flesh out those conversations. We get to have multiple points of contact. So doing the phone calls, doing text messages, doing the door knock, like actually coming up and like having 30-minute, 40-minute conversations with them in their communities, and then being able to take what issues are important to them and actually show like the work in those communities. So not just taking it, dumping into a database and saying, cool, this is what's important. Like, we're actually taking those issues, staying in those communities, advocating for programs, advocating to elected officials about like why these are important to their community members. And then when we talk about our political work, like supporting elected officials that are going to embody those type of policies and embody those types of agendas, because that's what's important to the members, that's what's important to our members, and that's what's important to community members around Georgia.
No, that's right. That's absolutely right. Definitely having the opportunity to engage in that way. To our audience, please drop in any questions in the chat and we'll have our guests answer them. But one of the other things I was curious, Brandon, is what are some obstacles you believe lie ahead for the movement in Georgia or broadly?
I mean, I don't want to keep on harping on SB 202, but it's so bad. Like, it's like I could literally talk about it all day long. But I think as we get into upcoming elections, as we get into like new voting cycles and what are the ramifications of it, we're gonna have just a lot of unexpected things arise from SB 202. So like whether that's like long lines or whether that's people like not being able to request absentee ballots or just a larger ballot curing list across the state, just a myriad of different things, like even all the way down to the enforcement of SB 202 and having like volunteers who want to give out water and possibly getting arrested for that. So like, I just can't even like imagine a world where we have a lot of like our volunteers are typically like older, getting arrested for like giving someone a bottle of water in line. So I think we're going to see a lot of those shock moments come out in 22 in order to like make a point. And so a lot of the work that we do now and a lot of the work that we want to pay attention to is like, where does that occur? And how do we continue to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future? Because I mean, it's just bad business for everyone, and it's just immoral at the end of the day. So yeah, we have a lot of work to do, and it's going to be a big road ahead of us.
Absolutely. I mean, voter suppression work is unfortunately happening all across the Midwest and the South and our nation. And so thinking through about like the strength and the power that the Black vote came out and now facing these challenges in cities that are predominantly Black is no mistake. So I'm just like curious, just like what are your thoughts and strategy thinking about answering to those folks that keep on trying to silence Black voters?
Yeah, I mean, like, I want to kind of follow up to that point. Like, it's not a mistake. Like, this is by design. It's literally, we look at elections, we look at the results, we see where a lot of voters, progressive voters, like participated. A lot of like people had Democrat support, where a lot of those elections were won, and it was in the absentee ballots. It was in all of the programs that are being attacked in SB 202. That helped to ensure that people just had the access to vote and had like the actual properties and the actual time to vote. And so like this is clearly by design. But I think when we think about like what are some of the tactics and how do we like move forward from this, one for us is just continue to harp on like how do we change the culture of voting in the state of Georgia, and how do we get people to vote in every election. So we always like say this thing around NGP, it's like every election, every time. And so like, that's what we really want to hold on to, because like, we know how important these elected officials are when it comes to creating these pieces of legislation. And we know that when we actually do show up to vote, like we win. So that's what the message is. That's what we want to continue to harp on. And that's why we continue to face all of these attacks. Because they know, like, if we come, we show up, we win. So how do we keep them from showing up? And that's what they're going to continue to press us on. That's what they're going to continue to try to write into law, but we're going to keep on fighting back.
That's right. And you heard it here. We're going to keep on fighting back. That is for sure, both in Michigan and in Georgia.
There you go.
There you go. To our audience, if you enjoyed this video, stay up to speed with all the amazing content coming out of Organizing Upgrade. Sign up at our website to hear about upcoming events, videos, articles about left strategy for organizers. Thank you all to who joined us today. Thank you to you, brilliant Brandon. And thank you for the production. Absolutely. Thank you for the production team at Organizing Upgrade. Please join us next week, same time, same day, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, and 4 p.m. Pacific.